All right. Welcome to Inview. This is another podcast that we're bringing amazing information, things that you should know. And I am here co hosting with none other than Sam. Sharmila is an amazing woman as well. And this is Inview with Sam and EVE. And good morning, good afternoon, Sam. How are you?
I am well, Eve. I'm well. So happy to be here with you.
Oh, and happy to add one more thing to bring awareness to the community. And I want to say publicly here, thank you for the heart that God has given you and for following what you were ordained to do. Thank you. So tell us a little bit about, I know that Inview once upon a time existed, right? And it was Inview with Sam and Donardo. Can you give us a little brief synopsis of that before we get diving into what's happening with human trafficking and Rahab's daughters?
Yeah, so Inview was because what we named it for is the fact that human trafficking is in plain view. And we see it all the time, and people don't know how to recognize it. And so we wanted to bring it to people's attention across all industries, across all verticals, and to understand that it happens in plain sight, in view of everybody. And this is where we need to bring that to our communities so that they can see it in view and do something with it. So that's what In View was sort of made to think about. And so we're excited to sort of relaunch in a post-COVID world. And, it's wonderful to co-host with you, Eve.
Yes, likewise. And for such a time as this, with all the things that are happening worldwide, and right now, the special focus is the wonderful Olympics out there in Paris. Wow. Um,
Yes.
wow, right? I can say is wow. And I know that you have had firsthand experience out there. Tell us a little bit of history of Paris and the Olympics of what's taken place this year.
Yeah, so we've been going in and out of Paris for the last 10 months, working on anti-trafficking prevention and identification. And it's been a journey, Eve. All large sporting events have a great deal of human trafficking. And probably in recent days, one of the most publicized ones was last year's FIFA World Cup, right? And the FIFA World Cup was in Qatar, and there was a great deal of human trafficking that happened there. And I personally got to interview 30 families who were Nepalese and were, in fact, selling their children to do construction work in Qatar to build this, and whose children were not even given water to drink. Like, they were told to drink salinated water, and many of them died from kidney failure because they weren't given enough food or water. And it's one of the many sporting events that brings human trafficking to light. At the last Olympics in Japan, we were there a year late, but because there were no spectators, it was a very different Olympics. And we were able to partner with local organizations to set up the first Japanese anti-human trafficking hotline. But this Olympics has been very, very different because Paris was sort of quite behind on its scheduling to get things ready. And we are living in a world with an enormous number of conflicts happening in EMEA, right? So Europe, the Middle East, and Africa have a lot of conflicts, and they're connected very much through land and short sea borders, right? And so in the last 10 months, we've seen a growth in the refugee population within Paris. And it's been coming from areas of conflict, right? So the Ukraine, Palestine, the Congo, Syria. There's a ton of different refugees coming in from different places. And this has sort of made everything more complicated because you've got new language related issues, right? That we don't realize are significant. And then when you have those language barrier issues, you're further then complicated by the fact that you have the inability to understand the cultural nuances of what's happening. And for us, we've done a few rescues so far, and all of them have been sex and labor trafficking related, and
Wow.
all have been refugees from other places. So,
Right.
um,
So because I'm sorry to interrupt you, so because of the lack of legal protections, obviously they face significant economic hardships, right? And so they're desperate for an opportunity to work, right? Or
so
because of
they
their,
do have legal protections because they've
oh,
been
they do.
accepted as
Okay.
refugees,
Okay.
right? But
Okay.
nonetheless, there is not enough housing for them. So while they await housing, in the city of Paris, it's estimated there's over 8,000 refugees living in tent encampments in the city.
Oh,
And as we've been serving food, there's not enough food, right? So even if we cook for 200 every day, there's still not enough
wow.
food to go around. And so, people are in grave need of food. We ran out of food pretty much every time we served it within, 20
Wow.
minutes generally, right? And unfortunately, people are really hungry. Women, children, right? Little babies, the elderly, everybody's camped out. And we made it a point to walk around and make sure that the elderly were given food, because they're just not okay to come stand in the line, right?
Right. Right.
Um, and as we were doing this, we've been interviewing the folks as they're having their food and whatnot, and trying to have translators available to understand what's been happening. And what we're finding is that, in the lead up, a lot of labor trafficking, especially of young men, and a lot of sex trafficking as payment for getting them out of the
Yeah.
war torn situations that they're in. And then the other piece of the puzzle that we see is the information around how this is managed by the French police, because their anti-human trafficking hotline is only open Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. So we're
Oh,
getting
that's
a
too
lot
much
of
for a
calls.
hotline.
We're getting a lot of calls on the weekends, right, of
Wow.
people
Wow.
who are in need of help. And in fact, literally this minute, Eve, I'm going to send this over to you. Business
Wow.
Insider magazine has literally just done a story on this, and I will forward it to you, the link, so you can put it up
Wow.
for our audience. But basically, the if you have a look at this, it is definitively an important piece of the puzzle, because it is super important that people understand that this is just not something that we are saying, but is in fact something that, you know, news agencies and the like are seeing as a problem, because it is a problem.
Definitely. And none of, and I'm seeing that all of this has taken place because of the challenges that these refugees are having. So they become vulnerable. So now they're targets, right? So now they know to take advantage of that situation. And because they're going to do it because of the hunger, because of the need, in some cases, maybe starvation, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's sad to hear that people make scandal for profit, and some would say, although our refugees are in need of much help. And I want to thank you and the team, Sam, for doing your due diligence in making sure that some of the refugees were fed by you and the team. And so that to me is huge. So they're
Well, I mean,
taking advantage
kudos
of
to
the
our
activity.
partner,
Yeah,
Serve the City of Paris, because they're serving food multiple times a week, and we
awesome.
were able to work alongside them. And kudos to like the American School in Paris and a bunch of other organizations that are working hard to feed these populations and collect food and do all those pieces of the puzzle, because it's definitively a community effort, and everybody needs to come together to make sure that these folks have what they need. Because if we're not culturally sensitive, it makes people more scared of law enforcement, and it makes people more scared. And so when we're not willing to approach them with cultural sensitivity to their language, to their needs. So for example, when we were preparing food during Ramadan, we made sure that the food could be contained until they would break fast at night, right, at sunset, and that we made sure that the food would be available before sunrise in order to make sure that they could keep to their schedules, right, for Ramadan. And we mostly serve vegetarian food. Even the hot food is stews and like boiled eggs and stuff, to be culturally sensitive to the fact that not everybody eats the different meats that are available. And just that little bit of consideration is huge, right? So, not putting ham and cheese on a croissant, but just making it cheese, or just the little things make a big difference in the trust levels that people have when they're working with us. And this is how we're able to interview them and get the right information from them about what's happening. And we had over 1,000 reports over the 10 months of trafficking occurring, either sex or labor, within the construction, hospitality, manufacturing industries. But I would say that hospitality has been, in this year's situation, one of the worst, because the sex trafficking is actually being sort of, concierges in hotels are in fact, helping to procure the right people and being paid by the traffickers to assist in getting the clientele, right? So it's quite problematic. And obviously, whenever you have large amounts of people who are working towards a goal that has to be finished on time, you're going to get more labor trafficking, because you just can't always find the number of employees you need to get that done at the price you need to do it for.
Right. And so with that, Rahab's Daughters obviously has a purpose, and Sam, where you are right now, has a huge purpose and an impact. What would you say the focal point right now that you're engaging out there during the Olympics right now, besides feeding the refugees, besides participating whatever you can, knowing the horrific things that are happening there? What has been the most struggle there?
I think the most difficult struggle is people understanding that this is happening right under their noses. The number of people that are just absolutely floored when we tell them that the Olympics has had a long history with human trafficking. And let's not forget that the Me Too movement started from the gymnastics team, the US Olympic gymnastics team, right? Began the Me Too movement. So let's not forget that there is sexual violence, gender violence that has been going on, right? Exploitation. And while that wasn't human trafficking, it was certainly an abuse of power. And human trafficking has been that when it comes to large sporting events and putting it together. Now, am I saying that the Olympic Committee is condoning this? I am absolutely not saying that. In fact, the Olympic Committee does its best to make sure that this kind of thing is thwarted when they're giving contracts out. The challenge, though, folks, is know your subcontractors. Do you know your subcontractors? Because most of the time, the contractors that you're going ahead and agreeing with, right, are not the ones perpetuating the problem, but their subcontractors are. And this is a very tricky situation, because if you're the general contractor and you've got to have what you need done by the date that you've promised it done, and you need to hire subcontractors, it is fine, you vet your subcontractors, but do your subcontractors vet their subcontractors? And this is how the layering of it gets really complicated. And people are like, oh, well, it should be easy to solve this problem. But it isn't when you're up against a deadline that has to happen. We can't say to the Olympic Committee, hey, we're going to need you to push the Olympics back a week because the stadium won't be ready, or the swimming pool won't be ready, or the whatever won't be. It's not possible, right? Whether it's summer or winter Olympics, it has a deadline. And getting to that deadline, we need to work on. And we also need to think through are we allowing these people to pay a living wage when we contract them? So instead of necessarily going for and this is on everything, right? Whether it's the Olympics or whatever, are we thinking about a living wage being paid when we are budgeting for these things?
Right.
And business owners, CEOs, I speak to you now because you've got to be thinking about the fairness of the contract that you're handing out, not just the cheapest, right? It's very easy to pick the lowest bid, but is that lowest bid going to provide a living wage to everybody who has to work on the project to get it done and still provide profit for the organization that you're handing it to? And if the answer is no, then you got to rethink the award of that,
Right.
right?
That's right.
And if the answer is yes, then you've got to monitor the award such that the contractor you gave it to isn't getting more profit than is necessary or reasonable because they're underpaying or exploiting the people delivering the project. And these are ethical things that we need to have our business people to look at, Eve, right? And you and I are in firm agreement on this, that there's an
Very
ethical
much.
business.
There is, and this is a call out. This is a worldwide call out. Rahab's Daughters organization is international, and so this is a call out for businesses not only in the UK, not only in London or in Paris or in any other country or in the US. It's everywhere, because I'm telling you, this is really affecting all of us. It's in your backyard, whatever country you're watching this from. It's in my backyard. It's in Sam's backyard, whatever country she's residing in or visiting, because no one is immune to this. Meaning, it's happening right now as Sam and I are talking. As we're here on the Inview and this podcast, I hope that you all share it, because we're going to come in once a week. And what's the time and what day, Sam?
Mondays. So we'll release a new one on every Monday generally. So stay tuned.
Yes, yes. We're going to give you a lunch hour of information. And we're asking all of you to share this information. Bringing awareness is so vital, that when you see something, don't just sit there and just watch. Say something. And then I want to ask you, do something. Get involved. Join the movement. And let's put a stop to human trafficking. As you've seen on the bottom of the screen, the website, the hotline number. Sam, I know you have some stories that I won't say you're dying to share, but you need to share. If you can enlighten our audience.
Honestly, for me, from this Olympics, the two young women who came out of the Ukraine are probably one of the stories that, for me, has captured my heart in this, just because of what they went through, right? So just the fact that they were trafficked from the Ukraine to Poland, and then from Poland to Germany, and then from Germany to France ahead of the Olympics, and the things that they had to go through, right? And the fact that they were sold all along the way as sex trafficking victims in order to get to Paris. And then upon arrival, when they tried to report the situation to the authorities, they encountered that the human trafficking hotline was closed. And because we'd been handing out stuff in the refugee camps, they were able to connect with us. But it is something that we need to sort of think about. And I know, look, resources are always a problem. And I understand why France has chosen that, because they can serve people the best between 9 and 5, Monday through Friday. The challenge is that we need more resources for this, because trafficking doesn't just happen Monday through Friday. And we need to support these hotlines, ours included, Eve, to be open 24/7, 365, because it does take effort, but we need to be available for victims 24/7, 365. And so, at least in our case, people can even man the hotline from home, right? They don't even have to come into the office. So,
and that's what I was just about to ask. I know we have a big ask at the end of this podcast, but your stories are heartfelt. It's somebody's mom, somebody's sister, somebody's daughter, somebody's friend, and someone's child, right? I mean, Sam, I know you have one more story to share when we just have about 10 minutes before our show is over, but people really have to, and it's just, it sickens me to think about it, to even try to visualize it. It just turns my stomach. What? It hurts my heart.
I mean,
People,
Eve, you had the experience this week of meeting our youngest survivor. And, you know, um,
yeah,
I'm sure after hearing his story and then seeing him years later now, when he's, a school-aged child now, but he was 7 weeks old when he was first raped on camera.
yeah, that just, oh,
What
just
was
got,
that? How did that feel like for you? Because I know, it had to have connotations for you, having
yeah.
heard the
I mean,
the child.
he looks to be an average, normal child, but every child, every adult has a story behind their life. And knowing his story, I didn't want to be inappropriate. I wanted to hug him and
Yeah,
hold him
but you can't. Yeah.
and just say, it's going to be okay. Whether he understood, whether he would understand what that means or not. But that's because I know his story, right?
Mm-hmm.
People, this is sickening. When I first heard that a 7-week baby was trafficked and videoed and made thousands of dollars off this video, I just want to like go through the camera and just say, really? All I can do is pray so that
Mm-hmm.
I can have that peace, hearing that story and getting to meet this young little fellow, smart, helpful, knowing the torture he had to go through. It
Mm-hmm.
wasn't his choice, people.
Mm-hmm.
7
And the
weeks.
healing process that he's undertaken in these
Oh my
last years, right? So it's been what, 5 years, I guess, 5, 6 years. But while that transformation is there, there's still scars, right?
God. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And I mean, this is the challenge, right, of this situation.
yeah.
This child was in so much pain at that time, right?
Trauma
And
that the body should have never
right.
experienced. It's not meant
And
to.
yeah, and I mean, Eve, you and I are big fans of the body keeps a score, right? And the fact that the body keeps score of the traumas that we face is a big, piece of what should be a different episode than this one,
Right,
but
right, right.
definitely one to consider. But when you think about the trauma that children and adult victims are facing, and particularly at the Olympics, when you think of the number of children that have been trafficked through countries to be sex slaves while the Olympics is happening, is a big piece of the and that they're being brought from war-torn countries
Mhm.
where I'm not convinced that they actually escaped the war, because they are now terrorized in a very different way.
Right. They're in their
And
own war. They're put
yeah,
into a
I mean,
war.
we interviewed families where the parents were like, they took us from one country to another and shoved us in a safe house, and the payment for that was raping our children and raping our wives, and just talking to families who have come down this road and now ended up in the refugee camps and are still being exploited is just, it saddens your heart, right? And the
Most
fact
definitely.
that they're put to work because of large sporting events, or that they were brought here because of that, even though that wasn't what they thought they were doing, right? So some of them
Right.
paid big money to the equivalent of a coyote to bring them out of the war, but in the end, whatever conflict region, whether it was the Congo or the Sudan or Syria or Palestine or the Ukraine, all of these are happening in a mere moment, and they're causing a refugee crisis larger than we've seen in a very long time. And just think of the exodus that this is creating across, right? And we sitting, in the Midwest aren't always privy to seeing what this looks like on the ground.
Right.
But let me tell you, on the ground in Paris is a very different situation in terms of human trafficking. And if we think we have a border problem in the United States, it's very, very different to this because here, all of these conflicts are happening in land borders that there is so much trafficking happening for both labor and sex that it is unbelievable what we have seen and heard.
And these refugees have to cross one border to another to another. As you've shared with me, that the Ukrainian refugees traveled through Poland, then Germany, before getting to France. So the traffickers are already like, hey, you need to pay this, you need to do that in order for you to get here. And they're just totally
Because
exploiting
the
them,
debt
right?
bondage, right? It's a debt bondage issue,
It sure
right?
is.
So that debt bondage is, and then they have to work it off upon arrival at wherever they decide to land them, right? Which isn't always where they thought they were going, right? So lots of Syrians thought they'd be reunited with family in Turkey or something else and have ended up in Italy or France or other places that they weren't expecting to go to. And we met a lot of young men, right, who were from Africa and like literally being forced to work on construction sites with no shoes, Eve. We were handing out socks, right?
Jeez.
Thank you,
Wow.
Bombas. Shout out to Bombas Socks because they
Wow.
definitely sponsored a lot of socks for us this year. But giving out socks because they have no shoes. Would you go on a construction site without shoes?
No,
And
and a parent wouldn't let a kid do it, but there's no choice. There's what you're saying. And can you all fathom to work? We complain about every little thing, and here they are being forced to do something in conditions that are not even safe nor
right.
healthy.
And for a lot of them, and to be fair, guys, this happened in the US, right? So I mean the New York Times did the article right before the Super Bowl around the roofers that were being used around the country who were teenagers who were being forced to work on roofing projects all over the place and were falling off roofs and getting very injured. So this is not just a problem of Paris, guys. This is a problem globally of
Very much so.
capitalism not catching, up with the dark side of things because these are problems everywhere, right? And but they're exacerbated during sporting events because if the sporting event changes its location all the time, then new infrastructure has to be built, whether that's renovating something or rebuilding
Yeah.
it from the ground up. Yes, it creates work. Yes, it creates jobs, but it also creates exploitation, right?
Yeah. We don't always think about who's that building that, or wow, this was a beautiful setup, without thinking who did they use to build
Mm-hmm.
it, right? And you're
Mm-hmm.
bringing light out of things that normally people won't think. They just go to enjoy the sport event.
Mm-hmm.
And people,
And
to my
there's nothing wrong
USA,
with that,
no,
right? There's
no,
nothing
not at
wrong.
all. Not at all. But this is now putting it in their mind and hopefully hitting their heart and saying, wow, this is happening here now. Well, I'm enjoying this. How can I help stop that? What can we do? So, Sam, you have 1 minute left of our wonderful
So
Inview
guys, what you can do
podcast.
is
Yes.
pay attention. Pay attention. If you see people working on a construction site who don't have hard hats and proper shoes and proper equipment, say something. If you are in a hotel and you see, a child who doesn't look happy to be there, and is sort of being dragged around and won't make eye contact, and say something. If you see people not appropriately dressed for the weather that they are in, right? So if you're in some super cold place and people are wandering around in mini skirts and heels, this is probably not indicative of the weather outside. I lived in Canada for a year. Trust me when I tell you, no one should be wearing heels while the snow is coming down because that's a
Hello.
very
Exactly.
specific kind of snow, right? So, like, think about what you're seeing, guys. Think about what you're seeing in the airports and the hotels. And if you want to know more, visit our website where we tell you about the signs to look for and learn more.
Exactly. And you see it on the bottom of the screen. That's rahabsdaughters.org. Sam, we have to continue this fight. we're in it to win it, but we need the whole entire village. So we hope that you've enjoyed this podcast. We'll be coming on every Monday, so stay tuned for more. We appreciate you being here and joining. And if you have any questions or comments, please do so. Place them under the comments in the platform that you're watching it through, and someone will get back to you shortly. So, wow, this was great. To bring awareness, but it's not great to do this work. It really isn't, but you got to have a heart to do it, right, Sam? And love
Yep,
for humanity more than anything. So, with that,
absolutely.
Sam, thank you for having me join and being part of this change that we often want to see and just talk about. So, remember, when you see something, say something and do something. And with that, it's time for us to go, Sam. Till next time.
Thanks, Eve. See you next week.
Thank you. You as well. We'll be right back behind just stay behind the scenes and we'll go and I'll be right with you, Sam. Thank you.